Fake Dating the Alpha, a paranormal werewolf shifter romance, written by Lily Robert. Prologue, December 23, 1991. A scream shatters the silence of the night. Victoria's breath catches in her throat, ice crystals forming in the air. Just minutes before, she'd been staring at their resort town. Once as picture-perfect as a snow globe, now twisted into something darker. Something wrong. The Christmas tree in the town square loomed like a shadow, and she'd pulled her coat tighter against a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. After years of barely enough snow to keep the slopes open, this season had brought storm after storm, each one colder than the last. That's when she'd heard it, that raw, primal scream. She'd immediately known. This was their doing, hers and the pack's. What have we done? She thinks, gut twisted in anguish. Her Alpha has meddled with forces beyond their understanding, desperate to save their failing resort. And now, the scream comes again. Terror that echoes off buildings until it seems to come from everywhere at once. What's going on? A man asks beside her, a human, one of their guests. His face is pale in the strange, diffused light. Before Victoria can respond, a figure stumbled into view near the Christmas tree, lurching like a wounded animal. "Steph!" the girl screams. Victoria's stomach drops. Her wolf's hackles rise. They'd wanted tourists, wanted their resort to thrive again. But not like this. Edward Carver will rejoice when he hears of this, she thinks bitterly. That bastard Alpha has been waiting for their pack to falter for years, circling like the predator he is, ready to strike. Well, it's only a matter of time until he strikes now. They damned themselves trying to save everything. The screaming girl collapses in the snow, face white as death. And howling between buildings, the wind carries that haunting melody Victoria has grown to dread. "Are you hurt?" she asks, kneeling beside the girl. What happened? The human's eyes are wild, haunted as she speaks. "It's Steph," she whispers through chattering teeth. "Someone call the police," the man shouts to the gathering crowd, their forms blurring in the swirling snow. Useless, Victoria thinks. What could human authorities do against the beast they'd unleashed? "What's your name?" she asks the girl. "Jamie." She mumbles dazedly. Her eyes meets Victoria's, begging as she adds, "She's frozen, in the cave, like ice, like a statue." Victoria's heart stops. She needs to keep this girl quiet, at all costs. "The lady in white," the girl gasps, fingers clutching Victoria's coat. "She took her." Sirens wails in the distance as Jamie dissolves into frost-edged sobs. Victoria stares at the mountains looming over them. She takes a breath, turns to the man by her side. Time for damage control. "Poor thing is having hallucinations," she tells him, pointing to the girl, and he immediately nods because of course. Hallucinations sounds more plausible than the truth. Victoria must stay strong. For now, all she needs to do is make sure no one believes a word coming out of that witness's mouth. Not a single soul must suspect what she's seen is real, or else the pack is done for. 3 years later. 1. Jamie. "Are you freaking kidding me?" Her sister's shrill voice screeches through the phone, making Jamie wince. She's tucked in the small back room behind the bar, the only place with a landline. Through the open door, the cozy main room bustles with the usual chatter and clinking glasses, clients relaxing after a long day on the slopes. The crackling fireplace and twinkling Christmas lights make the polished wood surfaces glow invitingly. It's picture-perfect holiday charm, except for Becca's voice slicing through Jamie's ear. "Stella is so excited to see you, she even made you a present," Becca rants on. "What am I supposed to tell her, Jamie? That her Grinch of an aunt prefers her drunken customers to her own niece?" Jamie holds back a sigh. Beyond the door, someone cranks up the TV volume. "Look, they're talking about this resort. We're on the news," a patron yells excitedly. You can tell Stella I'll visit on her birthday, Jamie says. I work at a ski resort, Becca. Christmas is our busiest season. The tips basically fund my year. On the TV, a reporter stands in front of the resort. Tragedy struck Pinewood Ski Resort 3 years ago when 24-year-old Stephanie Burke went missing. Jamie's stomach clenches as the broadcast cuts to a clip of her younger self, mascara-streaked and frantic. Why do they have to replay this particular clip on loop every year? Young adult going missing isn't very festive. As expected, curious patrons from the bar crane their necks toward the back room, recognizing her. Jamie focuses on Becca's voice. Well, here's an idea, her sibling snaps. Get a job near your family. We have plenty of bars here, you know. Jamie, are you listening to me? You can't hide at that resort forever just because... I like it here, Jamie cuts her off firmly. It's peaceful, and the mountains are stunning this time of year. More stunning than your private suite booked in the Bahamas? I doubt it. Jamie grits her teeth. I didn't ask you to book me a room. I never said I could come. She hears Rebecca sigh in response. This is a family holiday, Jamie. Remember your family? Bex, come on. Jamie sighs. What about Grandpa Joe? Her sister insists. He's not going to be around forever. At the mention of her grandpa, Steph's face flashes through Jamie's mind again. They used to get along great. Jamie, honey, is that you? Jamie jerks back to the present at the sound of her mom's voice ringing in her ear. Crap, she must have taken the phone from Becca. Mom, Jamie says weakly, didn't realize you were there too. Is everything okay, sweetie? Why wouldn't I be okay, Mom? Jamie replies cheerfully. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Honey, you don't have to put up a brave front with me. Her mother marks a pause before she decides to ask what Jamie already knows she's going to ask. Are you still taking your medication? Yep. Jamie keeps her voice light. She isn't. They make her feel sleepy and even less like herself. 3 years of this crap and she's through. I've got to run, though, Jamie says. Big crowd waiting on their drinks. Love you. She hangs up before her mom can press further. Taking a steadying breath, Jamie pastes on a megawatt smile and heads out to face her customers. The bar goes quiet, all eyes following her. On the TV behind her, Jamie knows without looking that her younger self is still pleading on repeat. They love to replay that bit. Plays on the sensational. A man sitting at the counter goes back from staring at the screen to Jamie, mouth gaping. Jamie thinks she remembers his name as Dave. He's a ski instructor at the resort. Oh, crap, he exclaims drunkenly. It's her. It's Crazy Jamie. The latter hurriedly grabs the TV remote in retaliation, switching channels from the news station to MTV. Mariah Carey's new Christmas single is playing. Jamie doesn't think it's very good. By next year, everyone will have forgotten about All I Want for Christmas Is You. Did you really see an ice lady freeze your friend? Dave asks. Jamie ignores him, thinks of popping one of her meds into her mouth, then remembers she flushed them down the toilet, and berates herself. Steph's frozen face is flashing before her eyes. Not real, Jamie tells herself. The whole thing had been an hallucination, caused by stress, the cold, and the altitude. Dr. Goldberg says her mind created the images as a result, and he is right. Still, in her mind, Steph's dead eyes stare in frozen terror. Always.
2. Edward. I must say, Victoria swirls her wine, I was surprised you agreed to meet. Edward raises an eyebrow. Oh? He has to admit Victoria Grant is just as beautiful as he remembers. She sits across from him in the hotel's lounge, all elegant lines and Arctic beauty, much like the luxury resort she's meant to inherit one day. She won't, though, not if Edward can help it. This resort will be his. From his corner of the mahogany bar, Edward takes in the space through practiced senses. The lounge screams old-world ski resort luxury. Crystal chandeliers, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the snow-covered mountains. You have quite the reputation, Alpha. His title rolls off Victoria's tongue like honey. They say you're completely disinterested in finding a mate. Edward takes a measured sip of his Bordeaux. One must settle down eventually. The lie tastes bitter, but he can hardly tell her the truth, that he's here investigating Jonah's disappearance and that he believes she has something to do with it. And that, when he's figured out what, well, then she'll have no choice but to cede this entire land over to Edward, without the latter even having to mate with her to achieve it. Pressure from the pack? Victoria leans forward slightly and Edward catches another whiff of that winter-sharp scent. To produce an heir? Edward allows himself a small grimace. Owen, my beta, has been rather persistent lately. That at least is the truth. It's always a good idea to weave in some truth with your lies. Something shifts in Victoria's posture like a predator adjusting its stance. She waves to the bartender for fresh drinks, her movements suddenly more fluid, more calculated. In that case, she holds his gaze, heat in her ice blue eyes. Shall we just get to it tonight? Edward's lips curl into a smirk. Straight to mating? Isn't that a touch premature? I would never dare, Alpha. Her reply drips with false modesty. The bartender sets down their fresh glasses. Edward's nose twitches. Something's off about the wine's bouquet, but before he can focus on it, Victoria speaks again. How long are you planning to stay? She traces the rim of her glass. I imagine you'll want to be home for Christmas. Edward waves off the comment. If it wasn't for the gaudy decorations plastered all over town, he'd have forgotten the holiday entirely. It's a long time away, he says, making Victoria raise an eyebrow. It's in 3 weeks. I don't really celebrate Christmas. Edward pauses, choosing his next words carefully. Though I was hoping to run into Jonah while I'm here. Victoria's smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. He would have loved to see you. Always speaks very fondly of you. A strange shimmer catches Edward's attention. The chandelier light reflecting off Victoria's hair looks almost like falling snow. He blinks, forcing himself back to the conversation. Fond of me? He asks. He always shook in his boots whenever I appeared. Is that why you were hoping to see him? Victoria's hand slides over his, and Edward finds the contact oddly pleasant. Which is strange. He usually hates being touched. You make it sound as though I definitely won't be seeing him. He pulls away, noticing something flicker across Victoria's face. Surprise, perhaps, at his abruptness. But what did she expect? No one had seen Jonah in almost a year, not since he'd moved here to be with his mate. He's on holiday. There's a new guardedness in her eyes. Edward finds himself inappropriately amused by her expression and he snorts. When it occurs to him, he can't remember the last time he'd snorted at anything. With his mate, I presume? He says, full of mirth. Victoria's smile turns indulgent. Of course. You know how these things are, Alpha. Jonah and Reem haven't even been mated for a full year. You couldn't keep those two apart if you tried. The room feels warm, the lights of the chimney bright and hypnotic. Everything seems softer somehow. Pleasant. Edward finds himself sharing her smile, though he's not quite sure why. Jonah's fine, Victoria says, and Edward thinks, yes, of course he is. Why wouldn't he be? You, on the other hand, are looking a bit flushed, Victoria pursues, making Edward frown. Do I? She smiles. It's a cold, calculating smile Edward thinks he should be worried about, but it's difficult to worry about anything. It's not like you to be flushed, Victoria says. They say you've forgotten how to have fun altogether. She leans in, her mouth close to Edward's ear. You know what I think? I think the reason you're not mated isn't because you're picky like you'd like us all to believe. It's not? Edward asks. No. Victoria smiles. I think it's because you're boring. No one wants to Edward. He closes his eyes. Boring? Really? He doesn't think so. He can be interesting, surely, if he'd tried. What was I saying? He asks, his tongue feeling oddly heavy. The room has taken on a dreamlike quality, the chandelier lights creating halos that shouldn't be there. That you'd like to take things upstairs? Victoria's foot brushes against his leg under the table. Her scent has changed. Or has it always been this overwhelming? Edward frowns. He doesn't remember suggesting that at all. Really? I said that? Victoria nods, and so he assumes it must be right. His enhanced hearing picks up footsteps approaching, different from the other guests, more purposeful. A hotel clerk appears, his cologne too sharp against Edward's sensitized nose. "Excuse me, Mr. Carver, your assistant is on the phone for you. He says it's urgent." Victoria's hand finds his arm. "Take it in my office," she offers, her smile oddly bright in Edward's increasingly blurry vision. More private than the lobby. He thinks it's a good idea, like everything she's been saying for the past 10 minutes, except the walk there feels longer than it should. His enhanced hearing picks up Victoria instructing the clerk to direct any other calls to the front desk. Something about that seems important, but he can't focus enough to understand why. Her office is all glass and chrome, moonlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Edward drops heavily into the leather chair, grabbing the receiver. "What is it?" "Sir, I have the Richardson Pack's new trade agreement." Sam's voice sounds frustrated. "They're demanding an answer tonight about the timber rights and—" He stops. "Sir, did you hear what I said?" Edward squints at the ceiling. "Aren't we all looking for answers?" There's a pause on the end of the line. "Sir, are you feeling okay?" "Of course," Edward replies. "You sound a little, Sam clears his throat audibly. "You sound drunk, sir." Edward would have probably been offended if he had the energy. "Well, I'm not. Only had 2 glasses of wine with Viola." "You mean Victoria?" Sam asks. "Pretty sure it was Viola." Edward decides after a beat. Alarm creeps into Sam's voice. "Where are you exactly?" Edward looks around. "Her office?" "I think—" "Her private office?" Sam's tone sharpens. "Look, Alpha, you need to get out of there. Now." "You're the one that called me." Edward protests sluggishly. "Look, I'm pretty sure you've been drugged," Sam says, his voice sounding so very far away. A crystal paperweight on Victoria's desk captures Edward's attention, fractals of light dancing like ice. "Sir, sir." "Stop shouting," Edward mumbles. "You're in danger." Sam's panic cuts through the pleasant haze. "Please, Alpha, run. Jump through a window if you have to. Just get out." Something in Sam's tone pierces the fog. Edward's training kicks in. He needs pain, clarity. He slaps himself hard, then grabs an ornate letter opener from Victoria's desk, driving it into his thigh. The sharp pain brings a moment of lucidity. Window. Run. He can do that. The glass explodes around him as he crashes through. Cold air hits him like a slap, snow cushioning his fall. Edward forces himself up, stumbling away from the hotel. The town lights below beckon, promising safety, but they swim and blur before his eyes. That's when he sees it, a massive pine tree, twisted and ancient, its branches reaching out like grasping fingers. Something about it seems wrong, important. Edward takes another step toward it, and suddenly the ground isn't there anymore. He lands hard in what seems to be a tunnel. The air here is different, stale, thick with mold and age. His wound throbs, keeping him barely conscious. Water drips somewhere in the darkness, the sound echoing strangely. Then he sees her. A young girl stands in the shadows, unmoving. Even in his addled state, Edward knows this is wrong. She shouldn't be here, underground, alone. "Miss?" His voice echoes oddly. She doesn't respond. "Are you all right?" He reaches for her shoulder. His fingers meet something solid and impossibly cold. The surface is smooth, pristine, like glass, like ice. The girl is made entirely of ice, her features frozen in an expression of peaceful surprise, as though she'd been caught mid-breath and crystallized.
3. Jamie. The resort twinkles with lights and garlands as far as the eye can see. Pine garlands drape every lamppost and doorway, but Jamie is feeling more grinchy than merry as she hefts the trash bag into the dumpster. Right about now, Mom is double-checking their packing list for the Bahamas trip, while Becca and Mark wrangle an overexcited Stella into bed. Grandpa Joe is probably stubbornly tinkering with that unfixable camcorder he broke years ago. Deep down, Jamie knows they don't really believe her excuses of being needed at work. But the sad truth is, their worried hovering has only gotten more suffocating since the night Steph went missing. Jamie starts back toward her bar, boots crunching through the fresh snow. What she needs is a silent night and a stiff drink. "Excuse me, miss." Jamie whirls around at the unexpected voice. A paunchy, middle-aged man hurries toward her, waving what looks like a photograph. "I'm looking for my daughter," he says breathlessly, thrusting the photo toward Jamie. "Have you seen her by any chance?" Schooling her face into a politely neutral expression, Jamie dutifully studies the image. It shows a teenage girl with long, dark hair, smiling shyly at the camera. "Sorry, I don't think so. Hope you find her, though." She turns back to the bar, but a clammy hand clamps around her wrist. "Look, I know you were friends with that other girl, Stephanie Burke," the man says. "The one who went missing 3 years ago? Maybe my daughter is with her? If you could just tell me what you saw that night." "I already told the police everything," Jamie cuts him off, wiggling her arm free. The man's smile slips, revealing a flash of something calculating. Unease prickles down Jamie's spine. "You're a reporter," she says as realization dawns, "not a worried father." "Look, what matters here is that another girl has disappeared from this resort," the journalist insists. "That makes 3 people in 3 years, that we know of, all vanishing without a trace. If you ask me, we're looking at a serial situation here." "Well, nobody asked you," Jamie snaps. "And Steph is fine. She sends me postcards." Sure, those postcards never quite sound like Steph, and they're always postmarked from places Steph swore she'd never visit. And sure, Jamie hasn't actually heard or seen her friend since that night. But everyone swears Steph is fine. And so, she must be, right? The reporter opens his mouth to retort when suddenly he's yanked backwards by his collar. With a yelp, he goes sprawling face first into a nearby snowbank. "Fuck off," slurs a deep voice that sounds like whiskey poured over gravel. Jamie can only gape at the man now standing between her and the sputtering reporter. He's tall, unfairly tall, with dark hair that curl over the collar of what was once a very nice suit before it got drenched in snow. Jamie's gaze catches on the sharp cut of his stubbled jaw, though it's his eyes that make her breath stutter. Amber brown with flecks of gold, currently with pupils so dilated they nearly swallow the iris. "Thank you," she ventures. He doesn't seem to hear her, transfixed, at the twinkling lights strung along the bar's roof. "Sir?" Jamie waves a hand in front of his face. "Are you okay?" He sways alarmingly on his feet, and Jamie moves without thinking, ducking under his arm to steady him. This close, she catches the woody scent of cedar and pine mixing with the fumes of expensive wine she assumes he must have had in copious amount, seeing how he's blinking down at her. "Who are you?" His voice is deep and completely confused. "I work at the bar." Jamie gestures behind them, trying to remember if she'd served him tonight. She doesn't think so. She definitely would have noticed someone looking like that. Meanwhile, the man squints, reaching out to boop her nose with one elegant finger. "Oh," he slurs, sounding pleased. "You're not made of ice." "I'm not... what?" Jamie's heart skips. Did she hear this correctly? But he's already stumbling away, his expensive shoes leaving uneven tracks in the fresh snow. Jamie swallows hard. It must be a coincidence, this beautiful drunk man rambling about a frozen girl in a cave. Unless... She catches up to her mysterious rescuer, grabbing his arm. "Wait, please. Did you see someone made of ice? Where?" He smiles down at her, with all the benevolence of one certain of their intellectual superiority. "Your hair looks like fairy lights," he then declares. Up close, his pupils seem enormous. And here Jamie is, trying to get information from someone clearly not in their right mind. What an idiot. She needs to book an appointment with Dr. Goldberg about this tomorrow. Surely she must be relapsing. "Has anyone ever told you that you're very small?" the stranger asks, snapping back her attention. "You're like a pocket-sized person." Jamie glares. "Well, has anyone ever told you that you're freakishly tall? Like a gorgeous supermodel? She retorts, lamely. Her eyes then catches the dark stains on his thigh as they pass under the town square's massive Christmas tree, and she freezes. Shit, sir! You're bleeding! Am I? The man looks down with mild interest. Don't tell Sam. He gets twitchy. Jamie pinches the bridge of her nose. She can't leave some tourist wandering around in this state and injured. The man did just rescue her from a journalist. She owes him. I live just around the corner, she says, grabbing onto the man's arm. I'll take a look at that cut. This has nothing to do with caves and frozen women at all. Really, she's just a good Samaritan. You're very bossy for someone so small, the man grumbles, though he does allow himself to be steered toward her apartment. Jamie guides him up the narrow stairs, one hand firmly on his arm. I'm practically a doctor, she promises. Well, was going to be. 3 years of med school counts for something, right? She doesn't know why she's rambling like this, probably from nerves. Her duplex apartment above the bar is cozy, all exposed wooden beams and warm tones. It's not much, but staff housing is included and beats paying resort town rent prices. Sit, she orders, pointing to her second-hand couch. The man complies, fascinated by the crocheted throw blanket lying there. I should warn you, Jamie mutters, digging through her first aid kit. I never actually finished med school after Steph's disappearance. Disappearance? Her guest's head snaps up, eyes suddenly sharp, and Jamie freezes. Has she been tricked? Is he another journalist? But no, his pupils are blown too wide, his movements too loose. No journalist could fake that level of intoxication. She helps him out of his jacket, trying not to notice how well it fits across his very broad shoulders and failing miserably. It wasn't really a disappearance, she finds herself saying, suddenly eager for the distraction. She'd just been dumped that night, Jamie pursues. I made her come out to Spiders. That's the club up on the slopes, you know? She was crying, drinking too much. Her hands shake slightly. She ran out into the storm. I followed but lost her in the snow. I don't know how long I was out there. Probably too long. I remember finding this cave, but... The memory hits her. That soft, echoing humming, Steph's face turning toward her, beautiful and terrible and frozen. She closes her eyes. She's doing it again, entertaining her fantasies. But none of that was real, she says quickly, more to herself than him. Post-traumatic stress, or whatever my therapist called it. I made it all up, and I don't know why I'm telling you any of this. She opens her eyes to find her guest staring at her. A cave? He mumbles, eyes unfocused. Poor kid's probably still in there. Jamie's breath itches. He's rambling nonsense, she tells herself. He's just confused about what Jamie's been telling him. There was humming. The man sighs, sounding tired. A sad song. The first aid kit slips from Jamie's fingers. She didn't mention the humming to him. The melody floods back, that haunting tune echoing off icy walls, drawing her deeper into the cave that night. She'd followed it, stumbling through the darkness, calling Steph's name until... She realizes she's gripping her guest's arm too tightly. He looks serious, like he's about to tell her something crucial. Unconsciously, Jamie kneels closer. Your place is very small, the man then declares, slouching deeper into her couch. Jamie rolls her eyes. Don't move, she orders, going back to examining his leg. But her determination quickly morphs into confusion, because where the blood-soaked tear had been, there's only smooth skin. No cut, no scar, just dried blood. It's... healed? She breathes, confused. The man chuckles, warm and low. Of course, I stabbed it at least an hour ago. Wait. Jamie frowns, looking up. You stabbed your own leg? Their eyes meet, and that is when it occurs to Jamie how close she and this stranger are. It's been a while, a long while, since she's been this close to anyone this attractive. Actually, Jamie's fairly certain she's never been anywhere near someone this attractive. Christmas lights from outside cast shadows across his face, highlighting those ridiculous cheekbones. Against her will, her face goes hot. If you're fine, then you should probably go. She attempts, throat feeling dry. Sadly, his smile turns knowing, as if he could read her thoughts. Should I? His fingers brush her jaw, feather light, and then he leans to nuzzle her neck and Jamie gasps. What are you doing? She asks, sounding traitorously breathless. The man's breath is warm against her skin as he sighs contently. Can I ask you something? He slurs, sounding very drunk. Do you think I'm boring? Oh, definitely not. Jamie gulps. She needs to get this man out of her apartment ASAP before she does something truly stupid, like climb him like the well-dressed tree he is, but his wrists are sliding against her skin in strange, deliberate patterns, and she doesn't entirely mind. All right, she kind of likes it. A lot. There, he says eventually, looking pleased with himself. You're safe now. Safe? Jamie snorts. When was she ever in danger? Her guest sinks back into the couch, a soft, lazy grin unfurling across his too handsome face. Don't fall asleep, Jamie warns, noticing his eyes drifting closed. Won't, he mutters, promptly doing just that. Instead of shaking him awake, though, she pulls the knit blanket from the back of the couch and spreads it over him. Anyone wearing a Rolex surely isn't here to rob her. She might as well get some sleep herself. The adrenaline fades as she brushes her teeth, the night's encounters replaying in her mind. Her family's disappointment, the reporter with his leading questions, and now this man on her couch. This beautiful, bizarre man, babbling about a girl frozen in a cave. It's too much, and Jamie needs to lie down. But she's only halfway to her bedroom when she hears it, soft humming from the couch. Terror strikes, and she freezes by the door. It's the same song, the exact same haunting tune that had led her through the darkness that night, searching for Steph. It must be a coincidence, she tells herself, watching the man hum to himself in his sleep. This song probably plays in one of the tourist stores or something. The melody sends ice down her spine nonetheless, and the uncomfortable pit in her stomach doesn't leave Jamie by the time she settles in bed. Outside, the first fat flakes of snow begin to fall, shining like stars against the inky night sky.
Interlude. The Spirit. She watches as he stumbles into her hollow beneath the ancient pines. She sees him speak to her newest friend, the girl who cried so prettily before the frost took her. The girl doesn't answer. They never do, once winter claims them. His blood stains her snow. The scent is different from the others, wild and sharp, like pine needles in winter wind, not human at all. She drifts closer as he collapses beside the frozen girl, his breath making clouds in her air. Even unconscious, warmth radiates from him like sunlight through ice. Such strange warmth, for one whose heart feels as frozen as her peaks. Most are afraid when they seize her, but this one is already dreaming. Dark lashes against pale cheeks, chest rising and falling like waves against her shoreline. Beautiful, in the way storms are beautiful. But he cannot stay. The cold that preserves her friends would kill him, wolf or not. She's watched too many freeze trying to find them. This one should live. She gathers him in arms made of snowfall, gentle as first frost. The great tree in town sparkles like her cavern ceiling, a proper place for him. The lights paint colours across his face as she lays him down. One last gift, before she goes. She wraps winter around him until he stirs, ensuring he'll wake before true cold claims him. His eyes flutter, and she becomes mist and shadow, but lingers. He looks around, confused, lost. So much like her, this wolf in man's clothing. Perhaps, but no. The cold is rising. Time to return to her quiet caves, to her silent friends who never leave. Still, she watches him longer than she should, wondering why this one feels different. Why his frozen heart calls to her own.
4. Edward. Edward jolts awake on an unfamiliar couch, assaulted by the scent of cinnamon. He's in a cramped room, a shabby attempt at rustic charm with exposed beams and mismatched furniture that makes his inner wolf bristle with confusion. This is decidedly not the 5-star suite he'd checked into at the Grant's Hotel. Fragments of the previous night filter back: Victoria Grant's predatory smile, the phone call with Sam, launching himself through a window. His head throbs as an image surfaces, a girl made entirely of ice reaching for him with crystalline fingers. Then, the memory is broken by the sound of an unfamiliar voice. "Oh good, you're awake." His attention snaps to a petite woman watching him from across the room. Her blonde hair is cut short and she's wearing what might be the most offensive pajamas he's ever seen, a shapeless brown monstrosity that somehow manages to be both too big and too small at the same time. Edward is momentarily offended that anyone would dare present themselves to him looking like this. "Who are you?" he asks, rubbing his temples. "Jamie." She snaps, her scent spiking with indignation, spring rain and something citrusy. She looks personally offended by the question, which is interesting. He assumes she must be part of the Grant's pack, though there's something off about her scent he can't quite place. He can't waste any time wondering what given the circumstances, however. "I need a phone," he declares. The girl blinks at him. "You need, excuse me?" "Phone," he repeats, spotting a bedroom behind her. "Is it in there?" The girl nods almost reluctantly, which makes Edward frown. Not only do the Grants drug him, they ship him off to some clueless girl with no etiquette. He sighs, walking towards the room. "Coffee would be appreciated." He tells the girl in passing. "Excuse me?" "Black. No sugar." "Thank you." He's about to shut her bedroom door in her face, and which is flushing rather attractively with outrage, when something clicks as he catches another whiff of that peculiar scent. Spring rain, citrus, and human. Entirely, unmistakably human. How had he not noticed immediately this girl wasn't a shifter? There's something else, something familiar that... His own scent wrapped intimately around hers, he realizes in dawning horror. This girl isn't a shifter, but she smells like one because... A memory surfaces, her kneeling before him, concerned eyes meeting his, and Edward deciding she should carry his scent. He'd run his wrists over her skin, marking her. Edward nearly recoils. He'd scent-marked an unwitting human woman. This isn't a situation he has ever faced before, and he doesn't know what to do with it. Should he apologize? Humans don't understand scent marking, and the girl probably doesn't feel as offended as she ought to be, but she is watching him, her storm gray eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Where exactly are we?" he asks, dreading the answer. "Are you even part of the local pack?" "The what?" The girl blinks, and uneasiness increases sharply in Edward's mind. "You brought me here, did you not?" he insists with a frown. "Surely you must know who I am." The girl is now looking at him like Edward's not entirely right in the head. "And how the heck should I know?" she asks with a pout. "Are you some sort of celebrity or something?" Shit, this girl has no idea who she is, Edward realizes. Meaning, not only is she not a shifter, but she probably doesn't even work for the Grants at all. All of their hotel staff, even humans with no idea what shifters or alphas are, had at least been briefed on the fact that Edward was an important guest. That much had been obvious the night before. "Then why the heck have you brought me back into your home?" he exclaims, appalled. "I'm asking myself the same thing." The girl mutters, crossing her arms. Unbelievable, the girl is a puny human unable to defend herself, and yet she'd still brought him back here? "Have you got no common sense?" Edward insists. "What if I were a dangerous criminal?" "Are you?" The girl argues, making him gape. "Well, no." He concedes. But that is hardly the point. The human stomps her feet in annoyance. "You know, a simple thank you would have sufficed." She spits. Edward's lips twitch. He's tempted to remind this girl she can't speak to him like this. Except being an unknowing human, she has no idea how to address him, so it wouldn't be very reasonable of him. "Look," he says, rubbing his temples, "I'm just trying to understand what I'm doing here exactly." Jamie hesitates, her sense spiking with awkwardness. "Last night I was harassed by a journalist." She explains. "What?" Edward frowns. "Why?" "Will you let me finish?" Jamie snaps, heat rushing to her cheeks. "Anyway, you helped me get rid of him, so it didn't feel right leaving you after that, completely disoriented." "I was not completely disoriented," Edward denies, even though he doesn't remember what he'd been like in the least. Jamie's face indicates that she is well aware of that. "You didn't have to help me, but you did." She mumbles quietly. "That was, very kind of you. I just wanted to return the favor." Edward blinks. No one has ever called him kind in his entire life, because he isn't. "I'm not kind," he says, walking into Jamie's room to get to the phone. "And what you did was foolish." "Well, please try not to choke on your appreciation," Jamie calls out behind him, making Edward smirk. "How about that coffee, sweetheart?" He shuts the door on her indignant expression, catching her muttered, pretentious ass with his enhanced hearing. He finds himself fighting back an amused smile as he pulls up Owen's number, moving to the window where fresh snow drifts against the glass. His nose wrinkles at the lingering scent of stale beer and fried food, wafting up from the bar below. The Grants' resort looms above them on the mountainside, pristine and expensive, exactly where he should be right now instead of in this tiny apartment. "It's me," he announces, catching his own reflection in the window. His usually immaculate suit is wrinkled beyond salvation. Wonderful. "Oh, thank fuck." Owen's relief crackles through the line. "Sam's gone off his wits' end, claiming you've been captured and that the Grants set a trap for you and we should go and rescue you." Well, he isn't entirely wrong. Edward traces a finger along the frosted window pane, remembering crystalline fingers reaching for him. "Something happened last night, and I think it had everything to do with the Grants." "Sam's on his way over." The sound of paper shuffling comes through the line. "Richard claims you disappeared last night, though he didn't seem particularly worried. Your PA certainly was." Edward's jaw clenches. Richard Grant's lack of concern is telling. "Anyway, when are you coming home?" Owen says. "We need to plan for the merger." The scent of coffee reaches him, rich and dark. At least the human knows how to brew properly. "I can't come home," Edward says, tracking Jamie's movements by sound as she putters in the kitchen. "Jonah's still missing. Victoria claims he's on holidays, but that's a load of crap. And there's also the small matter of her drugging me." "She drugged you?" Owen's growl reverberates through the phone. "Alpha, that's cause for war." Edward rolls his eyes, catching another glimpse of Jamie through the bedroom doorway. She's measuring coffee with precise movements, her awful pajamas riding up to reveal surprisingly shapely legs. "Let's not be dramatic," Edward says as he forces his attention back to the window. "I don't think they meant to make me disappear, probably just to distract me." "From what?" Owen asks. "That's what I'd like to find out." Edward rubs his temples, trying to separate drug-induced hallucinations from reality. The ice girl had seemed so real. "Well, whatever it is, the Grants aren't going to just let you stick around." Papers rustle again. "They claim if you're not intent on courting Victoria properly, they'd like you off their territory by sundown." The wolf in Edward bristles at the threat, a low growl building in his chest. "We can't leave things be when Jonah's missing," he says. "We don't know that he's missing," Owen replies, his shrug audible. "And he chose to leave our pack to be with his mate. Not our problem." "He's Sam's brother," Edward protests, annoyed. "You're too soft on the pup," Owen observes. Edward rolls his eyes. "He's not a pup," he says, an image of his lanky assistant erupting in his mind. "Exactly." Owen's tone turns sly. "Stop coddling him, and maybe get one of your own, and a mate with that." "Not this again," Edward sighs. "You need to settle down, Alpha. Secure the pack, provide an heir." "Well, as long as it's not with Victoria Grant." He grimaces at the lingering scent of whatever they'd drugged him with. I would at least like to be fully conscious when I do take a mate. You joke, Alpha, but you may need to get back to courting her if you want to stick around. They're not stupid. They know you're here for a reason. Owen's voice turned serious, and they're bound to become more paranoid after last night. Edward's spine straightens. Wait, did something happen? You mean on top of them drugging you? Yes, actually. While we still don't know if something did happen to Jonah, someone did go missing from the Grants resort. A pause. A human girl. Not our problem. The image of ice blue fingers flashes through his mind again. Not our problem? Edward snaps, indignant. If all the disappearances are somehow linked to the Grants, which is likely, how is that not our problem? Do you want the human authorities to come sniffing around shifter business? Owen keeps quiet at that for a moment. How do you know it's linked to them, though? He challenges. Because otherwise they would have asked for our help, obviously. Edward snaps. I'll call you back with an address for Sam. He says abruptly. Give me a moment. He ends the call, his enhanced hearing picking up the low murmur of television news from the other room. When he emerges, Jamie is standing frozen before the TV, coffee pot forgotten in her hands. Her scent has turned sharp with anxiety. Natalie Sawyers has last been seen 2 days ago with her parents, the news anchor announces. The Sawyers family had been staying at the local Pinewood resort. The same resort from which 2 people have gone missing the last 2 years. Edward cautiously approaches, clearing his throat. A teenager has gone missing, Jamie whispers, eyes fixed on the screen. And in other circumstance, Edward might have been concerned with how pale she looks. But as it is, his attention is focused on the screen. Because they're broadcasting the missing teen's picture, and Edward has seen her before. In fact, he's seen her last night frozen in ice in a cave. He's sure of it.
5. Jamie. Jamie can't tear her eyes away from the screen. Natalie Sawyers smiles at the camera, dark hair in neat braids, alive, warm, unfrozen. The image flickers, and for a moment it's Steph's face instead, with that goofy grin she always wore in photos. Her hand trembles around Steph's latest postcard from Miami. Having a blast, miss you. The handwriting is neat, careful. Nothing like Steph's usual chaotic scrawl. Jamie's been telling herself the difference doesn't mean anything. Just like she's been telling herself that Jeff, the ski instructor who vanished last season, really did just take off without notice. There's no pattern, her therapist had insisted. Sometimes people just leave. But now a teenager is missing. The sound of running water filters down from upstairs, her mysterious guest helping himself to her shower without so much as offering his name. She should probably be more concerned about having a stranger in her apartment, but she can't focus on anything except Natalie's face on the screen. 15 years old. Last seen walking back to her hotel room at the resort. Just like Steph, who'd stormed out of spiders into the snow, just like Jeff, who'd gone for a late-night ski run and never came back. The sound of loud banging on her door from downstairs snaps her attention, and reluctantly she heads down to check out who it could be. The bar doesn't open before 12. Hopefully this won't be another journalist. As she climbs down the stairs to the bar front, though, it turns out to be much, much worse. The banging on her door intensifies, and Jamie hears a familiar echoing from behind the front door. I told you fools we should give Jamie a heads up. Who knows if she's even home? Jamie freezes in her tracks and gapes. Is that her grandpa she hears? Surely not. Surely this is another one of her auditive hallucinations, like the night she'd followed humming to the imaginary ice cave. No way, Becca's voice replies. She would have told us not to come and you know it. Oh my God, Jamie yelps internally. Her sister is here too? How? Why? She's supposed to be in the Bahamas. That's not a very nice thing to say, baby. Her mother's voice admonishes. That is when Jamie's gaze meet a pair of big gray eyes that look a lot like her own behind the front window pane. They widen in excitement on the small face they belong to, a face which expands into an excited grin. Aunt Jamie! Stella, her 6-year-old niece, waves excitedly at her from outside. Jamie finds herself waving back weakly as her mother's face appears by Stella's side. Honey, there you are, she exclaims, sounding extremely relieved to find Jamie alive. "Open up." She obeys, hurriedly unlocking her front door, and is suddenly face to face with the full Matthews family crisis response team assembled on her snow-dusted front porch. Her mother stands front and center, still wearing her vacation clothes, a bright floral dress jarringly out of place against the gray winter morning. Behind her, Grandpa Joe leans on his cane, grinning like a maniac, his retired ranger jacket pulled hastily over an Hawaiian shirt. Rebecca, perfectly put together even in an emergency, has one manicured hand wrapped around 6-year-old Stella's mittened fingers, while Mark hovers awkwardly behind them in his usual peacekeeper position. "Start caroling," Stella screeches, before launching herself in an off-tune rendition of Jingle Bells. Only her father attempts to follow along while giving Jamie a sheepish smile. "What are you all doing here?" Jamie asks, hurriedly ushering her family inside. Grandpa Joe's kiss lands warm on her cheek as he passes. "If you won't come to the Bahamas will come to you." He winks, his eyes crinkling with the same mischief that always made him her favorite conspirator. Her mother pauses to squeeze her shoulder, and Jamie tries not to flinch at the familiar weight of concern in her touch. "What Grandpa means is that we all took time off work to be together as a family, and that includes you. So we'd rather be here than on the beach." Jamie watches her family scatter around her space. Stella immediately gravitating to the jukebox, Mark examining the craft beer taps, Rebecca's finger running along the bar top as if checking for dust. The morning sun catches on her diamond ring, and Jamie unconsciously tugs at her worn sweater. "You are happy to see us, aren't you?" Rebecca's challenge cuts through her thoughts, her sister's sharp eyes missing nothing. "Of course," Jamie says, forcing brightness into her voice as she moves to hug each of them in turn. Her mother holds on a beat too long. "We'll be staying with you if that's all right," she asks. Jamie pretends not to notice the wetness in her eyes. "Unless you'd prefer us to go to the hotel?" Becca chimes in, making her refrain from rolling her eyes. "Let's go upstairs." Jamie diverts, gesturing towards the staircase. "I'll make you guys some breakfast." The wooden steps creak under their collective weight as they trudge upwards, luggage bumping against the walls. Jamie's duplex apartment, which has always felt much too big, suddenly feels suffocating. "What's that on the news?" Mark's question cuts through her rising panic. His lawyer's attention to detail never misses anything. The TV still flashes Natalie's photo, and Jamie lunges for the remote, but she's too late. Her mother's face drains of color, crow's feet deepening around her eyes. Is somebody missing? The tremor in her voice makes Jamie's chest ache. Rebecca cuts in before Jamie can reply. "Don't tell me this is why you didn't want to leave," she asks, shoulders tense. "Because of some random disappearance?" Jamie's nails dig into her palms. There it is. That familiar mix of concern and judgment in their eyes, like they're all waiting for her to snap. "All right, let's just calm down." Grandpa Joe's weathered hands rise in a peacekeeping gesture, but her mother barrels on. "Honey, I told you staying at this station wasn't a good idea." Her voice drips with that special brand of maternal worry. "How can you get better when—" "I am better." The words burst out sharper than intended. "Look, I didn't decide to stay here because of the missing girl, all right? This news just came up this morning. How could I have known?" Silence descends, heavy and awkward. Only Stella's off-key humming breaks it. That and the sudden damning sound of running water from the bathroom, all too obvious when no one is talking. "Aunt Jamie," Stella pipes up, swinging her legs from her perch on the arm of the couch. "Why is your shower on?" Jamie, lost in thought on how to handle her family during this impromptu Christmas vacation, is momentarily stunned by the question. She doesn't remember turning on her shower. It suddenly hits her that it's because she hasn't, and sharp panic rises in her chest. Oh God, the man. She'd completely forgotten about him. Before Jamie can even formulate a response, Rebecca's hawk-like gaze zeroes in on the Italian leather shoes by the couch. Her eyes widen, darting between the shoes and Jamie's rapidly reddening face. "Do you have someone over?" The question hangs in the air like a soap bubble about to pop. "No, I don't." Jamie's voice rises an octave. "Then what is this?" Grandpa Joe asks, waving a tailored jacket that probably costs more than Jamie's monthly rent slash. Jamie snatches it back with a shriek. "Grandpa!" Her mind races. How does she explain harboring a complete stranger for the night? Her mom is bound to think she's completely lost it. Even her unwanted guest himself was confused as to why Jamie would ever let him stay over in the first place. "Jamie?" Her mother's voice has changed, taking on a breathless quality that makes Jamie's stomach drop. What's up with that tone? Is her mother having an aneurysm? Jamie looks up to find her eyes shining with an almost manic hope. "Baby," she whispers, awed. "Do you have a boyfriend?" "What the—" Jamie's heart plummets. "Is that why you didn't want to come on the family holiday with us?" her mother insists. "Because you wanted to spend the holidays with your new boyfriend?" She sounds so happy you'd think Jamie had just announced an engagement. "Oh!" Grandpa Joe's eyebrows dance suggestively. "Must be serious." "Guys," Jamie protests weakly. It's not." The bathroom door opens with a rush of steam, and time seems to slow down. A second later, her mystery guest stands in the doorway, his dark hair tousled from the shower, making him look younger, almost boyish, if you ignored the powerful set of his shoulders and the aristocratic angle of his jaw. Water droplets trail down abs that look like they were carved from marble, and his towel is slung so low on his hips it should be illegal. Jamie doesn't dare look away, in a mix of awe and absolute mortification. "Do you have any spare clothes?" he asks casually, then blinks at her frozen family like a king surprised to find peasants in his castle. "Hello," he adds, managing to sound both polite and amused. Nope, this just won't do." Jamie grabs his arm, trying very hard not to notice the warm, damp skin under her fingers, and yanks him back into the bathroom. No way that's her boyfriend. She hears Rebecca whisper to Mark as she closes the door. He's way too hot for her.
6. Edward. Steam clouds the bathroom mirror as Edward braces his hands against the sink, organizing his thoughts. The hot water has cleared his head somewhat, though his enhanced metabolism is still working through whatever Victoria slipped him. 2 confirmed disappearances on Grant territory, the teenager from last night, and Jonah. His wolf bristles at the thought. Jonah might have left his pack, but he was still Edward's responsibility. And now there are whispers of others, a ski instructor, a tourist. The Grant's silence on the matter speaks volumes. No alerts to neighboring packs, no requests for assistance, not even an acknowledgement of the problem. Edward's reflection slowly emerges through the condensation. Territory is everything to wolves. Nothing happens in an alpha's domain without their knowledge. If the Grants aren't asking for help, it's because they already know what's happening. Victoria's attempt to drug and compromise him makes more sense in this light, a clumsy effort to force his pack off their land before he could dig deeper. Then there's the matter of the cave. Edward closes his eyes, trying to separate drug-induced hallucinations from reality. The girl in the ice had seemed so real, her features perfectly preserved in crystal, like a macabre sculpture. He needs to find that cave again, preferably while fully conscious. But first, he needs an excuse to stay. The Grants want him gone by sundown, and investigating your potentially criminal activities won't exactly smooth things over between their packs. He dries off, grimacing at his ruined suit. The jacket is salvageable, but the pants are a lost cause between the blood and snow. He'll need something to wear until Sam arrives with fresh clothes. Edward opens the bathroom door, intending to ask his reluctant hostess for spare clothing. Instead, he finds himself facing what appears to be an entire family crammed into the tiny apartment. His enhanced senses pick up their collective spike of surprise and appreciation if he's reading their scents correctly. They all share Jamie's coloring, that striking mix of dark blonde hair and storm gray eyes, except for one dark-haired man who stands slightly apart, clearly an in-law. A child peers around her mother's legs with undisguised curiosity. Edward's brain, still slightly fuzzy, attempts to process this development. He's relatively certain these people weren't here when he got in the shower, unless Victoria's drugs are more persistent than he thought. "Do you have any spare clothes?" he asks Jamie, whose face has turned an interesting shade of pink. Her scent is a riot of embarrassment, anxiety, and something else that makes his wolf perk up with interest. "Hello," he adds, because his mother raised him with manners, even if she didn't anticipate this exact scenario. Jamie moves faster than he would have expected, small hands surprisingly strong as she drags him back into the bathroom. The last thing he sees before the door closes is the older woman's expression of delighted shock, while the younger whispers not so discreetly into her husband's ears, "No way, that's her boyfriend, he's way too hot." Edward furrows his brows in confusion at the word boyfriend. Jamie's determined expression crumples the moment the bathroom door closes behind them. Her eyes keep darting between his face and chest, mouth opening and closing without sound. "You wanted a word?" Edward prompts, partly to end her obvious discomfort, but also because his wolf is preening at her obvious appreciation, and it's a little ridiculous. Jamie awkwardly clears her throat. "Yes, well..." She settles her gaze on a point over Edward's shoulder. The latter belatedly realizes that while nudity means little to shifters, humans tend to be more sensitive about such things. Jamie isn't just embarrassed, though. Her scent is sweetening slightly as her eyes roam back and forth between Edward's eyes and his chest. He silently berates himself for how pleased it makes him feel. He has much more important things to think about than how her pulse quickens when he shifts his weight. "I have a request," the human manages. "Oh?" He instantly encourages as Jamie takes her breath. "Would you mind pretending to be my boyfriend?" She blurts, meeting his eyes. For a bit." "What?" The question catches him completely off guard. It doesn't help that her pretty blush is deepening, gray eyes still struggling to find a safe place to land. "Just to get them off my back." She backpedals at his expression. "A couple days at most. No, hours. Half an hour?" Edward opens his mouth to protest, but she doesn't let him. "You just need to shake a few hands, lie about our first date, and then we'll be out of here. I'll tell them you had to go away for work and you never have to see them again. How's that?" How's that, Edward thinks. That's insane and out of the question. He has missing persons to find, a potentially criminal alpha family to investigate, and a frozen cave to locate amongst other things. So his first instinct is to dismiss the idea entirely. But then, wait a minute. This could work out in his favor. A relationship with a local would give him the cover he's been looking for. The Grants couldn't possibly object to him staying in town to court someone, and Jamie, being human, unconnected to pack politics, would seem perfectly innocent. "I'll do it," he says, just as Jamie starts stammering apologies. "No, of course you're right, it's so stupid. Wait, what?" She stares at him like he's grown a second head. "I'll pretend to be your boyfriend," Edward confirms with a solemn nod. Yes, he thinks. The plan could work. He won't just say he's dating her, though. That wouldn't be good enough. After all, he just met Jamie. Nobody would think it a credible enough excuse. No, he'll claim the human is his fated mate. That would justify his supposed urgency to stay near her. Yes, no wolf would ever think to question another's fated mate bond. These things are sacred. Plus, Jamie won't even care since she's human. It's brilliant. Why would you do that? The girl's throat bobs nervously. You know, we wouldn't... nothing would happen for real, right? Her obvious distress makes him a little ashamed. Right. He's going to have to tell her something if he wants this to work. To be honest, it would actually help me as well if... He begins, but a knock at the door interrupts. "Jamie?" Her sister's voice filters through. "Are you planning on hiding in here forever?" Edward catches Jamie's scent spike with panic and finds himself oddly torn between amusement at her predicament and guilt at using her situation for his investigation. "Let's go." he tells her, grabbing onto her hand. "What are you doing?" Jamie yelps, panicked. She pulls back on his hand, pointing to Edward discard clothes. "Get dressed," she hisses. "You're not meeting my family half naked." Again. "But my pants are torn," Edward replies in what he feels is a very reasonable manner. Given the look he receives from Jamie, though, she doesn't seem to think so.
7. Jamie. The morning sun turns the fresh snow into a field of diamonds, dazzling against the cloudless sky. Jamie sneaks a glance at Edward as they approach the chairlift station. Even in his borrowed boots and ruined designer suit, he moves with the ease of someone who's never doubted his place in the world. Catching her reflection in a store window, Jamie winces at her puffy lavender unicorn-patterned snow boots. She, on the other hand, looks like a walking marshmallow next to Edward's polished presence. No one will ever believe they're dating. Her family certainly didn't, not after she stood there gaping when her mom asked, "What's this lovely young man's name?" Edward. His name was Edward, and she really should have asked before agreeing to this charade. "Who doesn't know their own boyfriend's name?" she mutters, trudging after him toward the chairlift winding up to the Grant Hotel. "Oh, come on." Edward steadies her with a surprisingly gentle hand when her boot slips on the lift. "Nobody noticed." She sighs. Maybe not, but her family will notice something's off if she doesn't step up her game. She wants her mom to look at her with excitement instead of worry, Grandpa Joe to crack jokes instead of walking on eggshells, and her sister to stop pestering her about making better choices. "We should use this time to get to know each other," she says firmly. "Build our cover story. You know, if we're going to be selling this relationship." The chairlift sways gently as they ascend, but Edward remains silent, his dark eyes scanning the slopes with unsettling intensity. "What do you do for fun?" Jamie asks, searching his face. It's so stern she can't picture it smiling. "I must have taken this lift last night," he muses. "Yes, that makes sense. Otherwise, my clothes would have been more damaged." "Okay, next question. How did we meet?" she prompts, trying to redirect him. "At your bar?" He shrugs, still distracted. "Do you know of any caves near the Grant Hotel?" The word cave sends ice through her veins. She can't think about caves, can't let herself wonder if Natalie is there, frozen like Steph. Not with her family watching her, waiting for her to crack. "Who asked who out?" she blurts. "Never mind, I asked you, obviously." That finally earns his attention. "Obviously?" He arches an eyebrow, confusion flickering across his features. Jamie gestures between them, laughing nervously. "You know, why would you ask me?" Edward blinks, like he sincerely hasn't realized he looks like a Greek god, while Jamie definitely does not. "Never mind," she mumbles. Through the mist, the Grant Hotel emerges like a fairy tale. Soaring stone towers and gleaming windows perched atop the mountain, surrounded by dense forest and jagged peaks. "What do you know about this place?" Edward asks. "The hotel? Not much." Jamie adjusts her hat against the wind. "The Grants own the resort and everything else for miles. They're like royalty around here." "Is that so?" His tone carries an odd amusement, like he knows something she doesn't. "Actually..." Jamie's voice trails off as she spots a woman who looks like she stepped out of a fashion magazine. "See that stunningly beautiful girl? That's Victoria Grant." "You don't say," Edward quips, helping her off the lift with steady hands. "She runs the resort for her dad, Richard. Oh my God, she's coming over." Jamie's heart skips as the statuesque blonde approaches, her white gold hair glowing like a halo. "And she's looking at us," Jamie whispers. "Why is she looking at us and waving?" "Hello, Edward." Victoria's voice is honey over ice. "Glad to see you in one piece. Where'd you run off to last night?" Panic grips Jamie. The woman who signs her paychecks knows her fake boyfriend? Edward's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Here and there. Victoria's brows arch. Should I have the staff pack your things? Jamie's stomach drops as Edward stiffens. That won't be necessary, he says, his voice suddenly commanding. His hand settles on Jamie's lower back. This is Jamie. We met last night. Did you? Victoria's gaze sharpens and Jamie swears the woman sniffs the air. Her ice blue eyes widen. Did you send... I did. Edward cuts her off with a brilliant, dangerous smile. I've grown quite fond of Jamie. I knew from the moment we met that we'd share a deep connection, almost like our souls connected. Victoria's face goes chalk white. Your souls... She looks between them, her voice tight. You mean she's your fated... That's right. Edward's arm tightens around Jamie's waist. Jamie is mine. Yours? Jamie squeaks, wondering when this charade spun out of control. And I'm not leaving. Edward's grin flashes teeth. Now, let me know when my assistant arrives. Victoria growls, a sound that raises the hairs on Jamie's arms, then storms off. Jamie, still frozen in Edward's embrace, stares after her. Something is happening here she doesn't understand. She didn't buy it. Edward mutters against her hair, his breath warm. What? Jamie asks. He spins her to face him, his movements fluid and controlled. She didn't buy it. You and I need the Grants to believe it. Why? His lips lower to her ear. I'm investigating her and her father. The words hit like ice water. What? Her father... Edward growls, clapping a hand over her mouth. Be discreet. Don't talk to me like that. She slaps his hand away. Frustration flashes across his perfect features. It makes him look less composed, less aristocratic, less unreachable, but no less beautiful. I'm going to kiss you now, he says. Jamie blinks. Kiss me? His hand cups her jaw with surprising gentleness. Victoria isn't stupid, and your nervous rambling isn't helping. What if I don't want you to kiss me? She challenges. Then I wouldn't force you, Edward says solemnly, but don't expect me to play along if... Jamie yanks him down by his scarf, crushing her mouth to his. For a moment, it's overwhelming. He's so much larger than her, one hand spanning her waist while the other cradles her head. She feels delicate, safe, owned by the way he holds her, all measured and controlled. She might have enjoyed it even, if there hadn't been a mechanical tint to it all. Like Edward is doing what he's supposed to do and not what he actually wants to do. Heat and frustration war in her chest. Before she can think better of it, she threads her fingers through his hair and pulls. The sound he makes, raw and completely spontaneous, shoots straight through her. For just a moment, control seems to slip in the way his lips part, in the way his grip tightens and with how he presses against her. Then he pulls away, straightening his jacket. Thank you for your cooperation, he says smoothly, avoiding her eyes. His voice is slightly rougher than before, and it doesn't escape Jamie's notice. In the distance, Victoria watches them with golden eyes, which Jamie is certain had been blue a second ago.
8. Edward. The hotel lobby's mahogany and marble should help Edward focus, but all he can think about is the lingering sweetness of Jamie's scent on his skin. It makes his jaw clench in frustration. The missing girl, Jonah, his pack, none of them are served by him getting distracted by soft lips and defiant gray eyes. People depend on him and he can't afford distractions. Alpha! A familiar voice breaks through his self-recrimination. Sam barrels across the lobby, all gangly limbs and barely contained energy. His usually pristine suit is rumpled, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hasn't slept. Oh, thank God, I've been searching everywhere. What happened? Are you hurt? Should I call for... Sam. One word is usually enough to stem his PA's enthusiasm, but not today. To think you were out there all night in the cold. Sam continues, practically wringing his hands. When Owen said not to worry, I told him, "You can relax." Jamie cuts in. He spent his night having fascinating conversations by the fire. Not with me, though, with himself, but hey. "Oh!" Sam's expression melts into pure relief as he meets her gaze. "Are you the one who found him? I can't thank you enough." "What do you mean by that?" Edward asks before he can stop himself, already dreading the answer. Jamie's smile turns distinctly feline. "I mean you talk in your sleep, big guy." "I do not." The rebuff come out more defensively than he'd like. Jamie is perfectly unimpressed by it. "Yeah, and sometimes you hum too." She grins. Humming. The memory hits Edward like ice water, that haunting melody drawing him through the snow. "Thank you so much for rescuing him," Sam gushes. "The pack would be lost without—" "Oh, come on, she didn't rescue me." Edward protests, but Jamie waves him off. "My pleasure, well, in a manner of speaking." She flashes Sam a brilliant smile that makes something possessive stir in Edward's chest and extends her hand. "I'm Jamie." His assistant reaches out automatically, then freezes at Edward's involuntary growl. There's a beat of silence, not even a second, and then his PA immediately drops into a submissive pose that would be comical if Edward wasn't so mortified by his own reaction. "Apologies, Alpha, Miss Jamie," he says, lowering his eyes respectfully. "For what?" Jamie's brow furrows. Edward forces his wolf down. He's playing a role. That's all this is. The territorial response is method acting. "I would never presume to touch what belongs to our Alpha." Sam explains reverently. "I'm sorry, what?" Jamie looks between them like they're speaking another language. Edward seizes the opportunity to redirect, pointing at the hotel restaurant in the back. "Would you mind making dinner reservations for tonight? For us and your family?" Her eyes narrow in suspicion. "Are you dismissing me?" "We need to maintain appearances," he says evenly. Underneath it, though, his wolf bristles at her challenge. Everyone in his life always follows his lead without question. It's necessary, efficient, right. So why does part of him thrill at Jamie's refusal to do so? "Fine." She jabs a finger at his chest. "But this better be a two-way street." She stalks off, leaving Sam staring after her in awe. "Wow, no wonder she's your mate, Alpha. She doesn't let you boss her around, and I know you secretly enjoy that a lot." "She's not actually my mate, Sam." Edward snaps, feeling vexed. "What?" Sam looks immensely confused. "But Victoria said—" "I just told Victoria that so she lets me stay. I needed a reason to stick around and investigate. Jamie's going along with the whole thing for some reason. I'm not sure what it is. I think she wants to get her family off her back. They seem to stress her, which is strange because they're all nice enough folks." Edward interrupts himself. Jamie is arguing with the concierge and the morning light is turning her hair to gold and why is he even noticing such a thing? For fuck's sake, he has responsibilities, a mission. He doesn't get to indulge in distractions. "So Jamie is not your mate?" Sam asks again. "Of course not," Edward snaps. "And can you imagine if she were? The sheer inconvenience?" Sam gives a small nod. "I guess it wouldn't be ideal." He concedes. "With her being human and all, there really wouldn't be much of a future for her amongst us." "I need to find that cave again." Edward interrupts, muttering more to himself than to Sam. "The cave?" Sam's voice turns hesitant. "What are you talking about, sir?" Edward keeps his voice low, though his eyes track Jamie's movements automatically. "Last night, I saw Natalie Sawyers, that missing teenager. She was frozen in ice, perfectly preserved, like some kind of twisted sculpture." "Frozen?" Sam's voice rises an octave before he catches himself. "But why would anyone? Do you think Jonah—" "I don't know." Edward's jaw clenches. "But I need to find her before the Grants realize I've stumbled onto whatever they're hiding." "I should go with you." Sam attempts. "Out of the question. You stay here and keep an eye on Jamie. I'll be going alone." "Go where?" Jamie materializes beside them, making Sam jump. Her scent carries notes of irritation beneath the lingering sweetness. "Business to attend to." Edward straightens his jacket. I'll meet you later. Later. Jamie's eyes narrow in outrage. We're supposed to get to know each other right now before my family grills us tonight. Yes, well, Sam knows me like the back of his hand. Edward waves dismissively, already mapping the quickest route to where he thinks the cave might be. He'll tell you all you need to know. Sam opens his mouth to protest, but Jamie beats him to it. Well, what about you? How are you planning to get to know me well enough to fool everybody? I don't need to. His lips curl into a smirk. I'm great at improvising. Edward turns before Jamie's indignation can affect him more than it already has, striding toward the door. He needs to find that distinctive pine tree he remembers from last night. Did he just delegate our date to you? He hears Jamie ask Sam, incredulous. Oh, he often does, Sam replies cheerfully. He thinks it's more efficient. Jamie's creative cursing follows him out into the snow. His wolf wants to turn back, to prove he can handle one simple conversation without pawning it off on his assistant. But he's trained himself better than that. Duty first. Always. Edward follows his own scent from the night before, picking up traces of Victoria's drug mixed with pine and frost, though amidst it all is Jamie's spring rain scent, which clings to his skin. He thinks he remembers her small hand on his arms anchoring him. When she'd checked his injury, he thinks, there'd been no carefully measured distance in her touch, though perhaps he doesn't remember it correctly. People always handle him carefully, like he might snap at any wrong move. Edward picks up his pace. The hotel's lights fade behind him with each step. No birds call. No animals move in the underbrush. The silence feels wrong, especially to his enhanced hearing. Dark clouds gather overhead, turning the morning light gray and hostile. Edward stops. Around him, black trees cut sharp lines against white snow. The wind dies completely. For a moment, he stands exposed in the emptiness. No pack duties, no careful control. Just the memory of being cared for and how surprisingly good it had felt. And then the sensation of being watched hits him hard. He's not alone out here. Swiftly, he scans the tree line, scents the air. Nothing. But his wolf's hackles rise anyway. The hotel has disappeared completely now. That's when he spots it, a pine tree twisted at unnatural angles, its branches bent like broken bones against the gray sky. The sight triggers a memory, that haunting melody that had led him through the snow. He can almost hear it now, hovering just below awareness. The trapdoor is new, recently replaced. Someone's covered his tracks from last night. His claws extend as he rips it open, the sound sharp in the dead air. Below, darkness waits. The cave smells of ice and stone and something older, something that makes his wolf growl. He looks around, he calls out. But Natalie's frozen form is gone. Only shadows remain, and the steady drip of melting ice. Somehow, amongst the echoes of his voice, soft singing answer. Sad. Familiar. A punch to the gut. There's no one around, not that he can see. But Edward is beginning to think he may not be alone down here after all.
Interlude. The spirit. He returns to her hollow, this wolf who walks alone. She sees him searching, no doubt, for the frozen girl, but the other wolves have taken her away. They always do. They steal her friends, hide them somewhere warm where winter can't reach. The despair rises in her like a blizzard. But this wolf, this one searches alone. Not with his pack, not with the others who guard her mountain. No, his eyes sweep the shadows like someone seeking what's lost. Seeking friends. She drifts closer, curious. His soul is so still, like a lake frozen to its depths. No ripples, no movement, just perfect, beautiful numbness. She recognizes that stillness. It calls to her like her song calls to him. And he does hear it. She sees him pause, head tilting slightly, listening to the melody that drifts through her caves. The song of ice and solitude, of perfect empty peace. His eyes search the darkness where she hides, but she keeps to her shadows. Not yet. He isn't ready yet. The cold hasn't settled deep enough in his heart. But soon.
9. Jamie. The hotel restaurant that evening is all twinkling lights and evergreen garlands, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snow-covered slopes. A massive Christmas tree sparkles in the corner, the scent of pine mingling with something that smells like her mother's favorite sugar cookies, reminding Jamie of simpler times. She used to love Christmas. Steph did too, which is why they'd spend it working at this station together the night she'd disappeared. The night she left, Jamie corrects herself. She hasn't disappeared. She just left. Perhaps Natalie Sawyer did too? Jamie tugs nervously at her dress. She'd borrowed it from Rebecca, which means it actually fits. A Christmas miracle in itself. Will it be enough to convince her family, particularly her hawk-eyed sister, that she and Edward are madly in love, though? Probably not. Her date hasn't even bothered asking her a single thing about herself, and Jamie is still confused as why he's agreed to the entire charade in the first place. What does Mr. Tall, Dark, and Commanding, who thinks delegating his relationships to his assistant is peak efficiency, has to gain from acting like Jamie's boyfriend? She knows it has something to do with Victoria Grant, but she can't figure out exactly what. The fact that she hasn't spoken to Edward since he ran off earlier isn't helping either. Now, he welcomes her and her family at their dinner table like he owns the place and done the cooking himself, his large hand settling on Jamie's back to guide her to her seat. God, he's the worst. The absolute last person she'd ever date. You look beautiful, he murmurs, like he's saying it just for her sake. Then he's pulling out her chair with those impossibly graceful movements of his, and she wants to retort something snappy, except they're supposed to be in love, so she just smiles at him instead. He seems pleased, if the way his lips brush her cheek in a feather-light kiss is any indication. Awkward, Jamie pulls up her chair, bumps against the table, and makes most of the wine glasses settled on there topple over. She reluctantly meets Edward's gaze as he resets them so casually, you'd think nothing even happened. His smile brief but soft in a way that reminds her of how he'd looked, half asleep on her couch. The memory does funny things to her stomach. Okay, fine. Maybe not the last person she'd ever date, she decides. Third on the list. On a good day. Thanks for agreeing to dinner with us, Edward, Rebecca says. It's probably not what you had in mind for the holidays, getting to know the entire family at once. Jamie tenses. She knows that tone. It's the same one Rebecca uses in court just before she goes for the jugular. It's my pleasure. Edward's smile never wavers. You can't really know someone until you get to know their family, and it's important to me to know everything about Jamie. Her mother actually sniffles that. You hear that, Jamie? He's family-oriented. Jamie groans. According to Sam's earlier, Edward doesn't have time for such frivolous pursuits as favorite movies or regular meals, so she highly doubts he's in any way family-oriented. His assistant had seemed downright offended by the suggestion that Edward might engage in something as pedestrian as relaxation. The Mr. Carver optimizes his time for maximum productivity. He'd explained earnestly. He doesn't have time for hobbies. But apparently Edward has time to perfect his Prince Charming routine because he's pulling that off seamlessly. So, what do you do for a living, Edward? Grandpa Joe jumps in, probably hoping to steer them towards safer waters. Investment management, primarily. Edward replies, My family owns different businesses. He's a business owner, her mother squeals, looking about ready to book the wedding venue. God, she's going to be so disappointed when they inevitably break up. Edward is hitting every item on the perfect son-in-law checklist. He asks her mother about her tutoring business with just the right mix of admiration and curiosity. Compliments Rebecca's recent legal victory with specific details that make Jamie suspect he had Sam research her entire family. Even remembers that Grandpa Joe used to be a ranger, steering the conversation toward conservation efforts with the kind of precise interest that has her grandfather beaming. The Grants and I actually work closely together on how to best preserve this very resort. He tells him. Climate change has largely impacted the weather, and winters were getting hotter and hotter the last few years, which is neither good for business or the environment. Jamie pouts. It's impressive how they're all eating out of the palm of his hand. She wished she had the same confidence he so easily displays. These days, Jamie always feels like she never manages to say what she is meant to say. And being away from her family, people whose opinion she actually cares about, she'd convinced herself it didn't really matter, but now... "How did you two meet, Jamie?" Grandpa Joe asks, hoping to rope her back in the conversation. She briefly glances at Edward, frowns at how that smooth confidence settles over his features like a mask. She can practically hear the romantic story he plans to feed them, something appropriately magical involving Christmas lights. "He showed up so completely wasted at the bar one night, I felt sorry for the poor guy and let him crash on the couch," she says, giving Edward a little smirk. A heavy, awkward silence immediately descends upon their table after that. Every gaze turned to Edward, as if looking for confirmation. Jamie rejoices at the way he's suddenly at loss for words. "Oh, well, awfully generous of you, Jamie," her mother comments eventually. Jamie's smirk widens. "Well, I couldn't let him freeze to death, could I?" She jokes, entranced by the blush spreading steadily on Edward's cheekbones. She expects him to cut in with a smooth, perfectly controlled comeback. But then, he keeps stubbornly silent, and the silence stretches for what feels like entirely too long. And now, Jamie feels like she was mean. Is he really so embarrassed about having had too much to drink? Perhaps he's been more shaken by his experience than she thought. Something uncomfortable stirs in her chest as she remembers Sam's words. "Mr. Carver doesn't do fun," he'd said, sounding affronted. She's about to say something to defend Edward's honor when Rebecca jumps in. "Couldn't let him freeze to death. You were just hoping to get with him, weren't you?" Jamie blinks. "What?" She squeaks as the entire table, minus Edward, dissolves into knowing laughter. "Of course not. I wouldn't..." "Jamie, honey, nobody blames you for seizing the day." Grandpa Joe's eyes twinkle with mischief. "Oh my God," Jamie groans. This is karma for trying to embarrass Mr. Perfect, isn't it? Well, serves her right, she decides in good humor. Don't dish it if you can't take it. She meets Edward's eyes again, hoping to get him to laugh at her as well, but he looks as serious as ever. "I realize I never properly thanked you for helping me." His voice cuts through the teasing, surprisingly soft, and the entire table becomes silent again. When she meets his eyes, there's none of his usual calculation there. Only warm gratitude. "Thank you, Jamie," he reiterates. The sincerity in his tone makes her breath catch. For a moment, the rest of the restaurant fades away. No familial pressures, no fake relationship, just his warm gaze and the way her heart seems to skip every other beat. Anyway, Grandpa Joe waves his menu like a white flag. Who's hungry? The rest of dinner flows surprisingly smoothly. Edward's easy confidence contagious, and Jamie finds herself relaxing into the warm family atmosphere she's missed. For once, she doesn't feel like the broken piece that doesn't quite fit. Her mother's actually laughing at her jokes instead of analyzing them for signs of instability. Even Rebecca's usual sharp edges seem softened. It's nice. Dangerous, really, how nice it is. She should probably discuss with Edward how long they're planning to keep this up. They can't fake date forever, and the longer this goes on, the more it'll hurt her family when they break up. A hotel clerk appears at Edward's elbow, murmuring something about an urgent phone call. He excuses himself with that perfect politeness of his, and the spell breaks. "He's very charming," her mother sighs, watching him leave. "And probably very rich," Grandpa Joe adds with a wink. "What?" He holds up his hands at Jamie's glare. "It doesn't hurt to be able to pay the rent. I can pay my own rent, Grandpa." Heat creeps up her neck. She hates this, them acting like she's some damsel waiting for a wealthy knight to solve all her problems. "It's just nice to see you have someone to rely on, that's all." Her mother's worried voice sets Jamie's teeth on edge. Does he know about what happened? Rebecca asks, setting down her wine glass with deliberate care. And there it is. Because everything in Jamie's life has to circle back to that night, to Steph, to her supposed breakdown. It's like living in a house with funhouse mirrors. Everywhere she turns, she sees her family's distorted version of herself reflected back. What do you mean? She keeps her voice light, though her hands clench under the table. Don't play dumb, Jamie. Rebecca patronizes. If you want this to work, he should know. And what do you know, Becca? The words come out sharper than intended. What do you think he has to realize about me that he hasn't yet? Jamie. Her mother's soft tone feels like sandpaper on her nerves. No, say what you want to say. Go on. She forces a smile. You think that when he finds out I'm crazy, he'll leave. Am I right? That is not what I said, and you know it. Rebecca's lawyer voice comes out. We just want to make sure you don't... That I don't what, Mom? Jamie laughs. Fuck it up? Like I fucked everything else up? Is that what you want to say? Her mother's eyes fill with tears, and Rebecca looks ready to start citing precedents about sisterly concern. The familiar mix of guilt and frustration rises in Jamie's throat like bile. All right, Grandpa Joe clears his throat. How about we... If me being myself isn't enough, then he's not the one, is he? Jamie pushes back from the table, chair legs scraping against hardwood. Excuse me, I need the restroom. She walks away from their worried faces, their good intentions that feel like chains. They love her. She knows they love her. But their concern has become a cage. She's tried to escape it, but only found herself stuck in a different one instead. The ladies' room offers no peace. Jamie splashes cold water on her flushed cheeks, but can't wash away the frustration burning under her skin. She needs air. The terrace door opens with a blast of winter wind. Snow has started falling again, fat flakes dancing in the light spilling from the restaurant windows. Jamie wraps her arms around herself, her thin dress offering little protection against the cold. She gets it. Really. They watched her fall apart after Steph disappeared, sat through therapy sessions, fielded midnight panic calls. It was hard for them too, she gets that. But she wishes someone would look at her and see strength instead of cracks for once. Trust her judgment instead of just waiting for her to finally break. Jamie sighs, walking to the edge of the terrace if only to distract herself. The view below stretches endless and white. The slopes look otherworldly in the darkness, untouched snow glowing blue beneath the winter moon. It should be peaceful. Instead, the silence weighs heavy, making her breath steam in the frigid air. Movement catches her eye. A figure weaves between the trees at the edge of the resort, small, graceful, like a dancer in the snow. Jamie blinks hard, her heart stumbling. It can't be. She's not seeing things again. She's not. But the figure is definitely female, and suddenly Jamie can't breathe. Logic screams that it's not Steph. It can't be Steph. But what about Natalie? A teenage girl, lost in the cold, looking for help. Hello? Her voice carries across the empty slope. Are you okay? No response. But... The figure pauses. Jamie's already moving, taking the terrace stairs 2 at a time. Her heels sink into the snow as she runs, dress whipping around her legs. The cold bites through her skin, but she barely notices. Natalie, is that you? The temperature plummets. Each breath feels like swallowing ice. The figure turns slowly, and a familiar melody begins to play at the edges of Jamie's consciousness. Soft, sad, searching. Every instinct screams at her to run. But like that night 3 years ago, she finds herself moving forward instead, drawn by that haunting song. She knows how this ends. She's been here before. She keeps walking anyway.
10. Edward. So we'll liquidate the Thompson holdings before the quarter ends, Edward says, pinching the bridge of his nose. He's found a quiet corner of the hotel lobby beside a massive stone fireplace that does little to mask the lingering scent of Victoria's perfume. She's been through here recently, probably watching him. The market's unstable and I don't trust their new management. He concludes. Fine. Owen's voice crackles through the speaker. As you command, Alpha. Now. About the Martin Richmond family feud? Edward paces across the polished marble, his reflection fragmenting in the lobby's gilt-framed mirrors. What, that's not resolved? The headache building behind his eyes intensifies with each click of his shoes against stone. Tell them to work it out themselves. I'm not a marriage counselor. Mates don't usually go their separate ways, Alpha, Sam interjects. He's been hovering anxiously nearby and is now fidgeting with his cufflinks. There is no clear precedence on how to handle this exactly. He pursues. I'll think about it. Edward cuts. He catches the scent of dinner service starting up that reminds him he's kept the Matthews family waiting and concludes. Now, if you'll both excuse me, I have to go back to my mate. The words slip out easily, and sure enough, Owen immediately backs down. Edward watches a group of tourists trudge past as he files that observation away. Pretending Jamie is his mate might be the most effective strategy he's discovered for avoiding pack politics. Usually, Owen would have 3 more crises requiring immediate attention. You didn't tell him the truth, Sam asks once the call ends, his whisper barely audible over the crackling fire. Edward scans the lobby, noting the positions of security cameras and staff, before responding. Why would I? He'd just waste my time pestering about either coming home or claiming Victoria Grant, if not both. And we're here to find your brother, aren't we? Sam's eyes well up, the scent of salt hitting Edward's nose. Alpha, I can't thank you enough for… Edward interrupts immediately. Just doing my job, Sam. He reminds him tersely. Jesus, he knows the kid means well, but he gets so emotional sometimes it's uncomfortable. Come up to my suite later. Edward waves. We'll review our next steps, perhaps call Owen back if he needs more hand-holding. Walking back toward the restaurant, past glittering Christmas displays and the soft murmur of other diners, Edward feels his shoulders loosen fractionally. The warm glow of chandeliers and lingering traces of Jamie's spring rain scent make the space feel almost welcoming. Playing the attentive boyfriend to Jamie's family is significantly less taxing than mediating pack disputes or calming nervous investors. No complex feuds going back decades, no life or death decisions weighing on his judgment. Meanwhile, the humans have no idea what he is and don't expect a thing from him. It's not entirely unpleasant. Edward returns to find an empty chair where Jamie should be, though her scent lingers. Spring rain turned sharp with anxiety and hurt. The remaining Matthews family members look like they're attending a wake rather than a holiday dinner. Wine glasses clutched too tight, smiles too strained. Everything all right? He asks pleasantly, as if he can't smell the remnants of tears in the air. Where's Jamie? Carol's eyes meet his, swimming with maternal distress, but Rebecca cuts in first. She went to the restroom. She should be back soon. The words are clipped, her shoulders rigid beneath her designer blazer. Edward nods slowly, settling his gaze on Grandpa Joe. The older man has been watching him all evening with shrewd eyes that remind him of his own father. Now, those eyes hold a mix of worry and weary understanding. She got mad because of her mother's fretting and her sister's meddling, Joe says with an awkward smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Dad, Carol's protest, I'll go see if she's ready for dessert. Edward interjects smoothly, letting his voice carry just the right note of concerned authority. It works like magic, as it always does, their shoulders dropping, faces softening with relief at the prospect of someone else handling the situation. He briefly wonders what could have sparked such tension in a family that had been laughing together mere minutes ago. Then he remembers it's irrelevant, and not his concern. His only job is to convince every shifter in the vicinity that he's properly devoted to his mate. Which Jamie isn't, obviously. This is strictly business. The bathroom door creaks as he pushes it open. Jamie? No response, and more importantly, no fresh trace of her scent. But there is a trail leading toward the terrace, carrying notes of anger and something else. Fear? His wolf stirs uneasily. The terrace door stands ajar, letting in fingers of frozen air. Edward scans the darkness, tension building between his shoulder blades, though he refuses to acknowledge why. Her scent leads toward the slope, mixed with something ancient and cold that makes his hackles rise. He's not worried about her, though. That would imply emotional investment. No, if he's looking for Jamie through the darkness, it's only for appearance's sake, even if his wolf is already moving to follow her trail into the dark. Jamie! His call echoes across the empty slope. His heart drops. There, darting through the snow, this small figure. It's her. Damn it all, he thinks. She's going to make him look like an incompetent mate, running around in freezing temperatures wearing nothing but a cocktail dress. Even he knows humans are susceptible to cold. What is she thinking? Jamie! He tries again. When she doesn't respond, he jumps down the terrace, not bothering with stairs, landing gracefully in the snow. Then he breaks into a sprint. This is about maintaining appearances, he reminds himself, eyes glued to her back. Nothing more. He's catching up easily, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like he took forever when his arms close around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Where do you think you're going? The words come out as a growl. She twists in his grip, panic rolling off her in waves. Let me go. There's somebody out there. Edward scans the darkness, maintaining his hold on her slight frame. Where? He tries to catch another scent, but all he can smell is Jamie, her hair brushing his nose, the vulnerable line of her neck as she strains forward. Her usual subtle warmth, so different from the sharp, wild sense of shifters, is overwhelmed by fear. I can't see anyone, Jamie. He gentles his voice without meaning to. Show me where. She struggles a moment longer before deflating against him. He takes the opportunity to shrug out of his jacket, draping it over her shoulders. She doesn't even notice. There was a girl. Her voice cracks. What if it was Steph? What if it was Natalie? Edward stiffens at the teenager's name. If Jamie saw what he saw last night, then he should. But no, he can't leave her out here shivering and clearly distressed. Frustrated with the whole situation, he scoops her up. She weighs almost nothing in his arms. What are you doing? She protests, though instinctively curling into his warmth. Didn't you hear me? There is somebody out there. I heard you, but you're freezing Jamie, so I'm taking you back first. First? She looks up at him with wide, storm-gray eyes that make something in his chest squeeze uncomfortably. Before I go back and check, he explains, confused by her expression of wonder. You're going back? Her voice sounds small, uncertain, like she's used to being dismissed. You'll check? He nods, avoiding those two perceptive eyes. There's a missing teenager, of course I'll go check. It's the only logical response, and Edward prides himself in being logical. Humans are ridiculously emotional, he decides firmly. A melody drifts across the snow, soft, haunting, and terribly familiar, and Edward freezes mid-step. His enhanced hearing picks up notes that shouldn't exist in nature, crystalline sounds that make his wolf want to bare its throat. Jamie's voice calls him back, barely a whisper. You hear it too? She asks, her tone full hope and fear tangled together, like she's spent years doubting her own senses. Yes. The word escapes before he can stop it, his usual calculated responses deserting him. She sags against him, a small sound of relief catching in her throat. The genuine gratitude in that sound almost distracts him from the song growing stronger, but his wolf's instincts scream danger. Edward quickens his pace, keeping his movements smooth despite every instinct urging him to run. The hotel's warm lights seem much further away than they should be. What is it? Jamie asks carefully, clearly reading the tension in his jaw or perhaps the too tight grip of his hands. Nothing good. He keeps his eyes locked on the distant windows. Whatever you do, keep your eyes on me. Don't look back. Why? Her question trembles, but she obeys, focusing on his face with complete trust that hits him harder than it should. Just do as I say, he mutters. The singing follows them all the way to the hotel doors, beautiful and wrong in ways he can't explain.
11. Jamie. All hope of slipping back to the table unnoticed vanishes the moment Jamie steps into the warm glow of the restaurant. Her mother's face drains of color, Grandpa Joe's fork freezes halfway to his mouth, and Rebecca's expression shifts into what Jamie mentally calls her cross-examination mode. She's still wearing Edward's jacket, which smells expensive and somehow manages to be warmer than any coat she's ever owned. She finds herself missing his steady presence beside her. He'd been like a shield against their worried glances, their careful voices. Now that the adrenaline is fading and his furnace-like warmth isn't wrapped around her anymore, she can't stop shivering. Had he really been that warm? Like holding on to summer itself. Are you even listening to me? Rebecca's voice cuts through her thoughts as a waiter sets down a cup of hot chocolate, the good kind, with actual melted chocolate and a hint of cinnamon. Where were you? Why are you all wet? Bathroom malfunction? Jamie attempts, knowing it's hopeless even as the words leave her mouth. It is. Jamie, honey, tell us what happened. Her mother's voice has that special tone, the one she used when Jamie was little and woke crying about Dad. It makes her feel about 5 years old. She sighs. There was somebody outside. What? The look her mother and Rebecca exchange could power a small city. There really was! The words burst out of her. I thought of that missing teenage girl, so I went to check it out. Alone? In those clothes? Grandpa Joe cuts in. Sweetie, come on, not your best move. You should have told someone. I did. I told Edward, and he's gone to check now. Another loaded glance passes between her mother and sister, conducting an entire conversation without words. I thought you didn't want him to know. Rebecca's voice carries careful warning. Know about what? About, you know. Rebecca grimaces like she's tasting something sour. Your episodes? My episodes? The word comes out sharp. This has nothing to do with any of that, I told you. Edward's return cuts through the tension and Jamie's speech. I couldn't find anybody, but I'm going to call the police, in case they find something, he says. That won't be necessary. Rebecca practically leaps from her chair. Jamie was just confused. Right, Jamie? What? No, I wasn't. Jamie? Rebecca's voice could freeze hell. I think we've had a long night. Edward told you there was nobody out there. You believe him, don't you? The implication hits her like a physical blow. You think I hallucinated again? She barely registers Edward's questioning look. It doesn't matter anymore. How about we go home to reset, honey? Her mother's voice drips with false cheer. Tomorrow we'll call Dr. Goldberg and... There was somebody out there. Jamie stands so fast her chair scrapes against the floor. I know what I saw. But their faces, Mom's careful concern, Rebecca's tight anxiety, even Grandpa Joe's uncomfortable shifting, tell her everything. She's back there again, on national television, desperately insisting her best friend wouldn't just leave without saying goodbye. Looking crazy, being crazy. I believe you. Edward's voice seems to come from very far away at first, like she's hearing it underwater. But then his eyes meet hers, steady and certain as mountain stone. I believe you. Her entire body sags with relief, like a puppet whose strings have been cut. For the first time in 3 years, someone actually believes her. You shouldn't encourage this, Rebecca says to Edward, her lawyer voice in full effect. When he raises an eyebrow in question, she shoots Jamie an apologetic look before continuing. 3 years ago, she had a traumatic night when she was separated from her best friend, Steph. Becca! Jamie's warning comes too late. Steph is fine, by the way. Her sister barrels on. But for a while we didn't know that, because she hadn't bothered telling anyone, including Jamie, that she'd left the station. And Jamie here had... She was under a lot of stress. Her mother's arm wraps around Jamie like a shield. It was hard for her, thinking her friend had been kidnapped. Edward's gaze moves between them, his expression growing increasingly perplexed. Suddenly, Jamie feels bone-tired. What does it matter what her fake boyfriend thinks of her breakdown? They're not even really together. I hallucinated finding Steph in a cave. she says flatly. For the longest time, I was convinced I'd found her, frozen in ice. Edward's eyes sharpen. Frozen in ice? Her mother opens her mouth, probably to offer another well-meaning defense, but Jamie's done pretending. Yeah, that's right. I thought my friend had been turned into ice. The words taste bitter. Still see it sometimes when I close my eyes, her face frozen in fear. She pauses, might as well go all in. Oh, and there was this lady with her. She was unreal, like a mirage made of snow. But she moved, and she sang. Let's go. Rebecca grabs her arm. Let's go home. Jamie resists. She can't face it. Their worry, their shock, their careful diagnosis of her mental state masked as concern. How about you guys head out? Edward's voice cuts through the tension, impossibly calm. Jamie can sleep here tonight. With me. The suggestion hits like a thunderbolt. Her family looks equally stunned. Why are you staying here instead of with Jamie if you're dating her? Rebecca's arms cross, lawyer mode reactivating. It's just for tonight. Edward's smile never wavers. I thought it'd be romantic. He turns to Jamie, something calculating in his gaze. But I can cancel the champagne if you're not up for it? There's clearly no champagne waiting upstairs. No romantic evening planned. Edward wants something from her. Information probably, given how his expression changed at the mention of ice. She should say no. But the alternative is going home to worried whispers and carefully hidden phone calls to her therapist. Yeah, okay. She forces a smile. Sounds great. The way Edward's eyes gleam tells her she might have just made a deal with the devil. But right now, even that seems better than another family intervention. Jamie keeps her eyes fixed on her feet while Edward handles everything. The dinner bill, her mother's worried hovering, Rebecca's thinly veiled suspicion. He manages it all with practiced ease, his presence a solid wall between her and their concerned glances. The steady pressure of his hand at her back should be uncomfortable, but isn't. Maybe because she knows he's just playing a part. There's something almost comforting about his lack of genuine concern for her mental state. She traces the pattern of the marble floors rather than meet his gaze. She's seen that particular flavor of judgment too many times over the past 3 years. The elevator ascends silently, mirrors reflecting her pale face and Edward's unnaturally still form beside her. His suite, more like an apartment really, is all gleaming wood and floor-to-ceiling windows that would normally have her gaping. But exhaustion drags at her limbs, and her pulse still hasn't quite settled from earlier. So, from the top. His voice is clipped as he shrugs off his jacket, movements precise. Tell me what happened. Jamie sinks onto the edge of an oversized armchair, fingers twisting in her lap. My therapist says it was a, who cares? The sharpness in his tone makes her flinch. He's pacing now, restless energy in every step. Your therapist is obviously idiotic. Fire them. He snaps. Now let's get back to what happened that night. The night your friend went missing. She looks up, startled, and finds him watching her with an intensity that makes her breath catch. He's gone completely still, like a predator focused on prey, like her words might hold the key to something vital. Hope flutters in her chest, dangerous and unwanted. She won't be fooled again. Jamie's head spins, her pulse pounds in her ears. It doesn't matter what happened, she says quickly, wrapping her arms around herself. It was all in my head. It certainly was not. The conviction in his voice is almost painful. Sam bursts through the door, chest heaving. Alpha, I think I found something. I checked the cave. He freezes, spotting Jamie. Oh, I didn't know. I apologize. Edward dismisses the interruption with a sharp gesture, eyes still fixed on Jamie. Tell me what happened. His gaze is steady, certain, everything she's wanted someone to be for the past 3 years. Her hands shake slightly as she pushes her hair back, which is exactly why she can't trust it. "Look, I don't know why this matters to you," she says. "Because there are people missing. It's not just Natalie." Frustration edges his voice as he crosses the room in 3 long strides. "It's his brother, too," Edward says. She meets Sam's eyes and recognizes that particular brand of desperate worry, the same one she used to see in her mirror before the postcards started coming, before she accepted the truth. His fingers twist together just like hers do. "I'm truly sorry," she says softly, watching him deflate. "But I can't help you." "You saw something that night," he protests, "and it wasn't real." Her hands tremble as she digs through her purse, pulling out the postcard, her talisman, Dr. Goldberg had called it. Proof that she's not crazy, that Steph is fine, that the ice and the singing were all in her head. The corners are worn soft from countless moments of doubt. "My friend didn't go missing. She just left." She holds out the card like a shield. "Look, she writes to me." But instead of disappointment, Edward's face lights with triumph. He moves so fast she barely sees him cross the room. "Sam, come here." He passes the postcard to his assistant, who nearly trips in his haste to take it. "Look familiar?" Sam's face drains of color as his eyes scan the text. "It's the same one Jonah sends me. Same location, same text." His fingers tighten on the paper until it crumples. "So he really is missing." Sam's voice cracks. "He's really gone." Edward nods grimly. "Perhaps Reem is too. We haven't seen her since we've arrived," he says before turning back to Jamie. "You didn't hallucinate that night, and your friend didn't write this, Jamie." He waves the postcard like evidence in a trial. "There's something going on here. People are missing, and the only person who knows something, who might have seen something, is you."
12. Edward. Edward watches Jamie from across the room, tracking the rapid changes in her scent. Sharp anxiety giving way to hope, then fear, then back to doubt. "No." She shakes her head, her scent spiking with frustration. "No, not possible." She sits hunched in an armchair, head in her hands, heartbeat a wild staccato. Even her breathing is uneven. Edward bites back a sigh of frustration. He's been patient long enough. He needs her to tell him about that night, about the ice lady she mentioned. Every detail could be crucial. He crosses to her side, kneeling beside the chair to catch her downcast eyes. "This is real, Jamie." He keeps his voice steady, controlled, but she just shakes her head again in those quick, agitated movements that remind him of a trapped animal. "It doesn't make sense. It can't be real. Why would someone take Steph and leave an ice statue of her behind?" "I don't think that was a statue," Edward explains, choosing his words carefully. "I think that was Steph." Jamie's eyes finally snap to his, pupils dilated with shock. "Do you hear yourself?" she asks. "How does that make sense?" Edward winces. Of course she can't accept this. Her world doesn't include magic or supernatural beings. At least, she doesn't know it does. How to bridge that gap without revealing too much? "I saw someone too," he confesses, watching her body go rigid. "I saw Natalie." The admission feels dangerous, but Edward presses on. "I fell into a cave and saw her statue. Or, well, her, turned into an ice statue." He typically